That's the beauty of Zoom meetings. There's always something. Daniel, you want to start the meeting? Are we ready to go?
Yep, I believe we're ready to go. Should we do the roll call?
Yep, let's start with the agenda.
So Director Cote?
Here.
Director Gibson?
Here.
Director Zimmer?
Here.
Chairperson Ohilski?
Present.
Okay, all present.
Okay, so the first item, well, not the first item, the third item on our agenda is board member comments. We try to limit these to things that aren't on the agenda today. So does anybody have any comments they'd like to make?
None for Golden State.
Nor me.
Charlie?
I don't have anything, thanks.
Okay, none for me either. Let's move on to item number 4, please. So the consent agenda. You want to go through the items on it, Daniel, please?
Yes, on this month's consent agenda, we have approval of the minutes from the August 26th BMC meeting, the September 16th BMC meeting, and the warrants, budget update, and invoice register for invoices through October of 2020.
Does anybody have any questions or comments at this point? Does that mean no?
None. None from S&T.
None for Golden State.
Okay, let's go to public comment then, please.
If you'd like to make a public comment and you're on your phone, please press *9. And if you're on your computer, please raise your hand. There's no public comment at this time.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the committee. Does somebody want to make a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
S&T will make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a motion by Charlie and a second by Bruce. Any additional comments? Okay, seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Director Cote,
Yes.
Director Gibson,
Yes.
Director Zimmer,
Yes.
Chairperson Ohilski.
Yes.
Great.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is the executive director's report. So Daniel, we'll put it in your court here.
Yes, so for the October 21st, 2020 Executive Director's Report, I'll review the report and highlight the underlined items that you'll see in the report. Those are items that have changed since the last report that we have updates on. And so moving through the funding and financing summary, I guess just one comment on that. I think it's probably about time that we update that as a number of the funding and financing programs have changed and evolved. And so we'll look to do that with the next meeting's executive director's report. But then moving down, most of the updates on this month's executive director's report are regarding the land use planning process. And so the first update regarding the Los Osos community plan is that at the Planning Commission's October 8th, 2020 meeting, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the plan to the Board of Supervisors. And so the Board of Supervisors is currently scheduled to receive and review the plan on December 15th, 2020. Additionally, regarding the growth management ordinance, it was also recommended for approval at the October 8th Planning Commission meeting and will be under consideration at the Board of Supervisors on December 15th. Regarding the habitat conservation plan, the update is that the Board of Supervisors will consider a memorandum of understanding between the county and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to allow for enhanced management and restoration activities at the Morro Dunes Ecological Reserve. And then the update on the resource summary report is that the 2016 to 2018 report that included the District 2 sections that were previously extracted has been updated with a new assessment of Los Osos water supply to reflect the more recent annual monitoring reports prepared by the BMC, and additionally a clarification of agricultural and rural water supply demand estimates. The recommendation still is maintained for level of severity 3, and the Board of Supervisors will consider the resource summary report at its the revised report at its December 15th, 2020 meeting as well. And then regarding ADUs, the Board of Supervisors adopted amendments to Table O of the Coastal Framework on June 16th. These amendments would allow for ADUs to be established in the community of Los Osos. It is anticipated that the amendments to Title 23 and Table O of the Coastal Framework for planning will be going to the California Coastal Commission for approval later this year. Until such amendments are approved by the Coastal Commission, the county will review ADU applications for consistency with the state ADU law, which would allow for the constructions of ADUs in the coastal zone. Moving to the Los Osos wastewater project updates, we have updated values for the months of October and September, and some additional updates on the hemp and cannabis information. Regarding hemp, according to the Ag Commissioners, there is no hemp currently cultivated in and registered in Los Osos. The hemp grow approval for APN 067011057 expired earlier this year. And then regarding cannabis, the county is processing a development plan for a previously described cannabis site. And the project is currently tentatively scheduled for Planning Commission consideration in January of 2021, with a draft mitigated negative declaration to tentatively be released for public review before the end of the year. And that concludes my executive director's update for October 2020.
Okay, does any commissioners have any questions?
This is Mark. So I guess regarding the Los Osos community plan and when it goes before the Board of Supervisors in December, is it helpful to have the BMC present in comments, or, you know, I know a couple of us submitted letters to the Planning Commission, but I'm not sure how to proceed here, based on the fact that we won't have a meeting before it goes before the Board of Supervisors. So just kind of looking for a little bit of direction there.
That it? Hello?
Yeah, I guess this is Dan Heimel. I guess I could say that I think when we previously discussed the community plan and comment, the parties had decided to submit individual agency comments. I think, however, the plan at the time was to see how it progressed through Planning Commission, then revisit the topic, and redetermine what action the BMC may want to take relative to the community plan. I guess the only other, so definitely up for discussion for the directors and to provide directions to staff on how to proceed with regards to the community plan. And then I guess the other thing I would add is we do have the potential for a meeting in November, if necessary, in advance of the Board of Supervisors hearing date on December 15th.
Can I ask a question, Bruce? Are you there?
Sure, yeah.
What's the realistic possibility you'll actually have a meeting on December 15th?
It's scheduled. That's our last meeting of the year.
So you
It's-
normally hold
yep.
that meeting, the second meeting in December?
Oh, yeah. We're down to 2 meetings a month, and so the ones that get scheduled typically, we haven't canceled any of them, so
Okay.
we'll be there, and this will probably be, given a fair amount of time if it's needed. What we get is a recommendation from the Planning Commission, so all the input that agencies gave to the Planning Commission got processed there, and I guess all that becomes part of our packet. So any thoughts that got delivered to the Planning Commission get presented to the board, and I think if there's anything else, I'm happy to chat with any of my fellow directors here as to any questions they have about the process, but I think all the information is in at this point.
So Mark, what do you think? Do we want to have a special or a meeting in November to discuss additional input from the committee? Or do you want to talk to Bruce individually?
Yeah, maybe Bruce, I'll reach out to you after this meeting and talk a little bit about it. Didn't really see that the planning commission went into great detail about the water aspect, but we can talk about that before it goes to the board, before it goes before your meeting, I guess.
Okay.
That'd be good.
Yeah. I'm happy to take any input. That'd be fine.
Okay, any other comments before we go to public comment? Okay, let's go to public comment, Laura.
If you'd like to make a public comment and you're on your phone, please dial *9. If you're on your computer, please raise your hand. All right, Lindy, you just have to unmute yourself.
Okay, hi everybody. Lindy Owen from Los Osos. I wanted to, I'm a little confused about the ADUs being allowed, and I wanted to know if water credits will need to be applied for addition, because I see them happening already and I'm not sure if they're getting water credits. So I wanted to ask, I guess Bruce could answer that one. On this cannabis situation, I'm a little confused. Are we talking about cannabis grows that are inside of our basin? Because the one that's out by the wastewater plant looks like it's still operating, though I'm not positive. And I thought that he was going to be getting offsets from the reverse osmosis systems. 3.5 acre feet seems like a lot, and how will that be monitored? I'd like more details about how he's going to be able to get that much water credit for his new hemp, and if this is a new hemp development plan, or cannabis, I guess. The growth management ordinance, again, that was a little confusing, but it apparently has passed. If that could be clarified again. There was a suggestion in the community plan, I believe, I'm mixing a lot up, I'm sorry, that they would not have to do any water offsets. And I think that's incorrect, because we don't know how many there's going to be. So that bothers me, and I think it should bother all of us. And then the HCP, maybe Bruce could just clarify. I'm not sure who is the county taking over Morro Dunes Ecological Preserve enhancement, and who's paying for that? I hope it's not coming off of the taxpayers in Los Osos. And I think that was about all I had. I was curious about the sea pines water that they're getting. They look like they went way up, almost 4 million gallons in May, and then it was only down to 1.8 August and September. So just curious why it varies so much. So I guess those are my questions.
Okay. Laura, can you see if there's any other comments before we go to answering the questions, please?
There is. Jeff, you should be able, you just have to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Edwards, and it would be really refreshing if Supervisor Gibson could be candid about the community plan and his intent on December 15th. There will be one meeting of the Board of Supervisors, and they will approve the plan. Again, I wish he would be candid about his intent there. The problem is that the Planning Commission did a cursory review, at best, regarding water in Los Osos. All the info was in? Hardly. And the purveyors were completely misunderstood, not only by the Planning Commission, but by the Planning Department staff. They don't understand that the purveyors are fundamentally concerned about how to fund infrastructure projects and how new development would contribute. What's the mechanism for that? Instead, the Planning Department and the Planning Commission misconstrued the purveyors' letters to mean we're in trouble in Los Osos. At the same time, you all know we're at 69% of our safe yield. So this thing going to the board on the 15th is half-baked. There's still a 0 growth percent rate in the prohibition zone. We are retaining a level of service 3, which does not reflect the facts. The 2019 annual report is Exhibit A. So, and if anybody thinks that sending this plan to the Coastal Commission, the community plan to the Coastal Commission in this condition is going to be approved, well, I have very serious doubts about that. Moving on to the wastewater project flow and that sort of thing, I'm going to repeat my concerns about giving water away to the Sea Pines Golf Course. They're up to 62 acre-feet a year. They pay $110 is my recollection for the first 50 acre-feet, and then the price goes down to $75 an acre-foot. The wastewater project, and maybe they can confirm this under agenda item 6A, but it costs the ratepayers $7,000 to treat an acre-foot of water, and Sea Pines is paying less than 1% of that. The math doesn't work. So that's got to stop, giving away water to Sea Pines. And Wild Coast Farms, the cannabis grow, that should be rejected as well. You never did weigh in on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else, Laura?
There's no other public comment at this time.
Okay, we'll close public comment and bring it back. Bruce, do you want to respond to those questions that Lindy asked?
Well, there were just a couple of them that, the question of ADUs, I have to go back and consult my notes. I don't remember precisely the action that was taken. Staff had come with a proposal to ban ADUs in Los Osos until the community plan was passed. And I don't remember what the final action of the board on that was. You understand that all the questions of ADUs are responding to state requirements for updating our land use ordinance and our general plans to allow them more or less by right. And the state requirements are such that normal impacts like parking, for instance, are being put aside in an effort to create more housing. The matter of water supply is a different one, and it's complicated somewhat by the fact that the county does not control water service in Los Osos. So I'd have to look at that, but certainly ADUs fit in where water is available to serve them, and there are certain findings we need to make to allow them within Los Osos, or put differently, certain findings that we need to make if we are going to disallow them in Los Osos. All of that's going to get considered with the Coastal Commission, who I do believe in any case will delay considerations of ADUs in Los Osos until the community plan is in front of them. And as to the HCP, the whole concept of the HCP is that for development inside the urban reserve line of Los Osos, where we know that the building of a house or expanding of a house is going to impact sensitive habitat, the whole concept of the HCP is to have a dollar amount per square foot disturbed that goes into a fund administered by the county, and those monies are used for restoration and enhancements of the California Fish and Wildlife land that is the Morodunes the ecological preserve. And so the work on that piece of property is funded by new development. And that really are the only questions that I heard that needed a response.
Thank you, Bruce. Dan, do you have any comments before we move on?
I guess just only the question from Lindy about Seatime's water uses. Hopefully we can get an answer to that on item 6A as well on the presentation by San Luis County Flood Control District staff on the recycled water program.
Okay. All right. Without any objections, then let's just go ahead and receive and file that report. Does anybody have any objections to doing that?
None.
Okay, seeing none, we'll receive and file the executive director's report, and we'll move on to 6A, which is a special presentation about the Los Osos Water Recycling Facility. So Daniel, you want to turn it over to whoever?
Yeah. So there was a request at our August BMC meeting to get more information about the Los Osos Water Recycling Facility, and both in terms of flows and operations, but as well as status of recycled water retrofit projects. And so I had requested that the Flood Control District staff prepare a presentation, and I believe John Austin from the Wastewater Utilities Wastewater Division will be providing that presentation for us today. And with that, I will turn it over to John, and we'll switch him over to being the presenter to provide that presentation.
Okay, thank you. John, are you there?
Yes, I am.
John, you should be able to share your presentation now.
See it?
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you. Okay, I'm John Austin. I'm the wastewater manager for the county for the Los Osos wastewater project.
John, could you possibly move closer to your computer, because it's very difficult to hear you. You seem far away from the speaker.
Okay. I've been asked to talk about a few topics, give a brief overview of the recycled water system, some of our operational considerations, show you some trends, relevant water quality, status of the water connections, and upcoming projects. So we'll start out with this one. This is our recycled water system. It starts at the wastewater treatment plant, and an ag user spur is at Los Osos Valley Road. Next, the Bay Ridge spur connects to 2 leach fields that we use for disposal. A line spurs off at 10th Street for future connections to Baywood Elementary and Los Osos Middle School, followed by spurs for Seaside Elementary and Los Osos Community Park off of Los Osos Valley Road, continuing to head west. Then our main disposal point at Broderson Leach Field, that spurs off to the south, followed by The main line goes past the Monarch Grove Elementary School and ends at the Sea Pines Golf Course, which has been connected. These other ones are, with the exception of the two leach fields, Broderson and Bay Ridge, are not connected. We plan to connect two ag users in November, and then our next priority connection will be Los Osos Middle School. The black dashed line here shows influent flow to the plant. The reason for the variation of influent flow is that weekday flows are lower than weekends. This graph shows plant startup beginning in March 2016, when the community started to connect. The red line is effluent flow that left the plant, left the property of the plant, and I've trended it on a 30-day moving average just to dampen some of the wide fluctuations that we see. And yet these are still very wide fluctuations. The yellow strips represent summer seasons, June through August. And a large change you'll notice in the red line in the summer of 2019, just for reference, is a time when we drained one of our ponds at the plant and we discharged it out to the system. Talk a little bit about the operational considerations. This graph shows all flows on a 30-day moving average, the total flow in the blue line. This flow goes out the door of the treatment plant. The spike represents that pond being drained. The plant also uses recycled water for certain operations, but that gets recycled back into the headworks, so it's not counted in these values. However, this does include rainwater that falls at the plant site, since all stormwater on the site is treated through our process. The orange line, the orange straight line, represents what it would take to achieve the volume of water to Broderson leach field to achieve our limit at Broderson. That's that 448 acre feet per year annual average. The Broderson flow is the green line, and it's a significant discharge location. Shows that it was almost exclusively used last winter for discharge. Then the Sea Pines is the brown line, shows high water deliveries in 2019, and it's tapered off. It tapers off in the winter, and then it increased again in 2020, but not as much as 2019. Bay Ridge, at the very bottom, has had some problems with our delivery pipeline, and we found a defect, and we had to repair and retest it and put it back into service. Kind of an outline of our constraints. The Broderson limit is an annual average limit, which has given us some latitude, being that it's an annual average, not just an annual limit. And we're meeting that limit acceptably. I'll show you in a couple of slides. The Bay Ridge delivery had difficulties that we've overcome and are starting to send more water there with acceptable results in Willow Creek per our annual wetland monitoring report. Sea Pines is contracted for 50 acre feet per year. We've had extra water, so we haven't concerned ourselves with their taking more water, not at this time. Our limit is to send 10% to ag users, but we haven't achieved that yet. We're still working on it. We plan to connect the two users in sometime, hopefully next month. In all cases, we want to bring users online slowly, since we have less water than our original plan. We don't want to run out of water. Public contact users must irrigate between 10 at night and 6 in the morning. So if you, like a golf course such as Sea Pines, has to irrigate during that time. At the Broderson leach field, Our operators keep 2 to 5 of the total 8 zones online continuously. And then for operational reasons, Bay Ridge has an unusual operation which we're working to normalize, to bring it back so that both leach fields can basically take an equal amount of flow. The ponds at the plant were originally intended to be for seasonal variations. However, when we connected sea pines, we were then working under our recycled water permit. We modified the pond's use so that one pond was emptied in case we had out of spec water that we needed to divert, which has rarely happened. The other pond we keep at about 8 feet or higher in depth to prevent algae growth. And that has kind of stabilized our flows, which you'll see in a minute. We have construction contractors taking water. However, the volume they take is very low. And we expect we will eventually have to hold users with, to their contracted allocation or allotment as we make additional connections. We're not doing that right now. Okay, the value in the parentheses under Broderson is what we calculate to be the annual average flow value. And it's essentially taken by adding the volume of flow that's gone out the door to these individual fields and then dividing by the number of years. Were it not for the first year, we would be exceeding our limit for flow to Broderson. The Rincon report shows that there's been no unacceptably high groundwater impacts down gradient of the leach field as a result of higher than usual flows during the annual periods. There have been long periods of time where Bay Ridge has gone without water. However, the wetland monitoring report has shown no impacts. Sea Pines flows have exceeded the allocation, but the contract shows them to exceed their limit if water is available. So we're allowed to give them more water and charge them for it. So let's talk about water quality. We are meeting both of our permits. We have a waste discharge permit, waste discharge requirements, and then we have our Title 22, our full, and we have to meet a full Title 22 permit requirements. Our waste discharge contained the nitrogen limit, and at startup, we struggled to meet this 7 milligram per liter, which is a pretty low number. However, within short order, we got a handle on our process, and we've been able to exceed our that requirement. In other words, we're well below it, as you can see. Nitrogen values are listed there, and they've shown to be close to this range over the last 3 years. The coliform limit is in our recycled water permit requirements, and we had some tricky problems during startup getting that kind of dialed in, but recently we've had no problems. As long as we keep our maintenance up, we're doing fine. Talk about some recycled water connections. We're taking a measured approach to connecting users. The goal of 1 user per year may not be a goal we can consistently meet because we need to see users delivery or water delivery trends to assure we can continuously meet all of our customers' needs. The Los Osos Middle School is the next priority connection. They will not have an allocation, so we would like to study their usage before we kind of go forward. Backflow preventer assembly must be installed before we install their recycled water connection. A little bit about CIP. So the bullet items are the ones that we kind of have on at the forefront. We might be able to operate more efficiently with variable speed drives on the recycled water pumps due to the variability of demands over, over time. The second one, Broderson Leach Field CIP is for capital improvements plan is for removing biological growth on a routine basis in the leach field. We're initially assuming about a 15-year rotating program. Current practices call for drying each percolation unit out completely for a few days to reduce plant and algae growth. If we do get algae growth that's becoming problematic, we may need to actually excavate and rescarify the soil below the subsurface structures, and that, of course, would be costly. Broderson valves are oversized and kind of do a poor job of reducing the flows to the underground structures. They are large and have to be pinched way down. So we would, when they wear out, we will slowly replace them with smaller valves. And possibly, if possible, we're trying to incorporate their adjustment into SCADA. We estimate flows between Bay Ridge and Broderson leach fields at this time. A meter of one of these fields would add some accuracy and help detect leaks. We will continue to connect recycled water users. We have floating solar panels listed as something that is going to go on our water ponds. And overall, we consider recycled water as an important component of basin health. We're delivering water consistent with our permit restrictions. We feel we must manage flexibly to maximize benefit to the basin while serving our users within our agreements. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions before we go to public comment?
This is Dan Heimel. I had one question, John. With regards to the connection of new recycled water customers, how is that prioritization determined? I believe I heard you describe the middle school as the next priority customer. Curious, what are the drivers for that?
The middle school, I can kind of tell you what the middle school one is. The other priorities are kind of still a bit up in the air, but the middle school is just, we know they're going to take a lot of water. And I think initially we wanted to get water over in that area, and we also wanted to get rid of a lot of water. So that's kind of that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something we discussed for a number of years, Dan, preceding you. Okay, well, if there's no other questions at this point, Laura, can we go to public comment, please?
If you'd like to make a public comment and you're on your phone, please dial *9. If you're on your computer, please raise your hand. Lynette, you just have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. This is Lynette Tornatsky, Los Osos. That was a fabulous presentation. I'd just be interested to know if it could be made available to us online so we could view it at our leisure more slowly. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynette.
Jeff, you just have to unmute yourself. You're able to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Committee. In addition, thank you, John Austin, for the presentation. The first question I have is regarding Broderson. Given Broderson and its management is a critical basin management component, I'm curious about a couple things. One, why are we keeping it charged continuously? In the past, it was considered that Broderson would generally be a wet weather disposal site, that we would charge it maybe 6, 8, maybe up to 9 months a year, but no more. And I think that's part of the problem with its operation. Secondly, is that the 448 acre feet per year is an average. And frankly, we're generating about 460 acre feet a year from the wastewater facility. I believe at least 500 acre feet should be going into Broderson. The idea is to establish a mound to help us understand whether that water will push through the clay lens. Again, this is a critical basin management tool that we need to have info for. And as long as we continue to send water to sea pines, we're missing that opportunity, which leads me to sea pines. Their contract amounts 50 acre feet, yet we're giving them over 60 acre feet. Apparently last year it was almost 70 acre feet. Now we're at 62 acre feet this year. They pay, and Mr. Austin can correct me, but what is Sea Pines pay for 62 acre feet of water? By my calculation, it's $6,400. And when it costs $7,000 an acre foot to treat, that's a gift of public funds. We need to take Sea Pines off the tit. Additionally, there's this idea that we're going to be delivering water to dryland farmers. I heard 5 acre feet and 10 acre feet respectively. I think that's the Goodwin contract for 5 acre feet. Those contracts are over 5 years old. They've expired. You don't need to deliver one drop to them. And the idea that there's a minimum 10% for ag deliveries, we haven't done it yet. We shouldn't do it now, and we shouldn't do it in the future. Then I'd like to talk about the discharge at Bay Ridge. I think when you say upper, you mean Los Encinas, and lower is Redwood Court. I will tell you, if you go up to Redwood Court, the oak trees are dying because water's being injected into that area during the summertime. They're getting the fungus and they're dying. You need to take the lower basin off charge. And as far as Los Encinas, they have oaks too, and I think it's eventually you'll kill those oaks too. So the whole Bay Ridge recharge function, which has cost millions of dollars, is not only not functioning properly, it's killing the oak trees. I hope Mr. Austin can answer a couple of the questions I posed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Laura, anybody else?
Yes, one more. Lindy, you just have to unmute yourself. You're able to speak.
Thank you again, Laura. And thank you, John. That is a really interesting and well done presentation. Some of my questions are when you provide recycled water for dust control to contractors, are you charging for that? Next question, I definitely, if we are giving water to dryland farmers, that is a failure of the Ag Exchange plan that the Coastal Commission was waiting for. So again, I'd like to know if we've made any efforts to contact other large volume farm activities to see if they would be willing to take some of it and blend or whatever. It's always going to be less expensive to get it to the closest users than to pay for the pumping all the way up to Broderson. We also have the 10th Street Purple Pipe faucet. I just wonder if that's just a sleeping possibility for the future. I've heard nothing about it for a long time. I wanted to know the difference in the cost of water that will be going to the middle school versus what Sea Pines is paying. I certainly think our school district deserves a much better rate than a for-profit golf course. Another question, is there monitoring that's going on under Broderson to see if that upper basin or lower basin have saltwater intrusion? Because I've always questioned whether it made sense to try to push water down into a seawater intruded area of our basin. And I had one more. Tri-W property is a 340 acre collection basin. It would not be a bad thing to look at some disposal going to Tri-W, even if it is in those middle of the night hours. That would help that land absorb when those 340 acres during a heavy rainfall come flying down, and the erosion on the adjacent property is horrific. It is totally bad because it is not absorbing because we don't get enough steady rainfall. So looking into the idea of adding a disposal possibility to the Tri-W property is reasonable, and I think would help that soil absorb better when we do have big rain events. And I think that was all I had in the way of questions. Thank you.
There's no other public comment at this time.
All right, thank you. I would remind everybody that we're going to have a significant discussion on our implementation strategy, so we really need to move on as quickly as possible. So what I would suggest right now for Dan and John, if there's some big picture questions that you can answer, I would suggest that you answer them now, but that we provide detailed answers in our next meetings.
Actually, if I could, Mr. Chairman, this is Bruce. Let me break in to frame this. Most of what we heard in public comment were concerns and complaints about the operation of the wastewater facility, the wastewater system. And I really didn't hear much that was technical information supported with data that affects the specific actions of the BMC. So, I would suggest that those who are concerned with the operation of the Los Osos wastewater plant contact me or Public Works, and we can get them some answers. Many of those questions have been answered before. If members of the BMC are interested in specific consequences of operating the wastewater system, I certainly can facilitate connecting them with the relevant public works staff. So,
I appreciate that, Bruce. So thank you.
We'll have staff put that presentation on the BMC webpage on Public Works. But yeah, again, unless any of my colleagues on the board have specific questions, I think it probably would be more useful for us to move on.
Right, I agree. Does anybody have any other comments or questions from the committee before we move on to the implementation strategy? Okay, seeing none, then let's move on to item 7A, which is the implementation plan, preliminary scoring and ranking. I know that the staff's been working on this since our last meeting, so Dan, take it away.
Thank you, Chair Ohilski. Yes, pleased to provide an update and some preliminary results from the implementation plan initiative that has been one of the primary topics on the BMC agenda for the last couple of months, going back into early summer. Just a brief background on how we got here. During the preparation of the calendar year 2020 budget, we identified the need for a more comprehensive evaluation of the different water resources initiatives available to the BMC. And so the implementation plan was envisioned as an opportunity to evaluate and hopefully build consensus on how the BMC would want to focus its efforts and funding for water resource initiatives moving forward, and additionally aid in the future BMC budgeting process and the implementation of the basin plan. As we worked through that process, there were a series of steps that had been completed and presented at previous meetings. I think we go to the next slide. We went through roles and responsibilities. We developed the initial list of strategic initiatives, and then to the next slide. And we developed a scoring and ranking framework. And at our September 2020 meeting, the BMC directed staff, both the executive director and staff from each of the BMC parties, to complete the preliminary scoring and ranking evaluation of the different BMC initiatives. And so what we're here today is to present the preliminary results of that scoring and ranking for the BMC's consideration and input, and to discuss next steps for the implementation plan initiative and the BMC budgeting process. So if we move to the next slide. As the BMC staff, and when I should say staff, I should clarify that it included representatives from each of the BMC parties. And I want to take a moment to really acknowledge the efforts that the BMC staff contributed to the scoring and ranking evaluation. This was not a trivial exercise. I think there were a series of 4 meetings where the staff worked diligently, and I had, I believe, very productive discussions about both the scoring and ranking framework as well as the initiatives being evaluated with that framework. And so as the staff worked through that process, there were some modifications that were made to the initiatives themselves, as well as some of the scoring criteria. And I just wanted to highlight those here, just in case there's questions about how the lists are slightly different than were presented in the previous BMC meeting agenda packets. Some were minor, including just renaming some of the scoring criteria categories. But others were more significant, including the addition of an additional scoring criteria for supplemental water supply, consolidation of rainwater capture and gray water into the water conservation implementation initiative. We identified brackish water desal as infeasible at this time due to the requirement to dispose of a brine stream. Separating the program D wells into 2 separate initiatives, one with and one without, there should be an O there, ag exchange. And then we identified a new implementation initiative that I'll talk about later in the presentation. So if we go to the next slide, these are just the summary of the planning initiatives, and I won't go through these. We've been through these a number of times. And then the next 2 slides, I believe, are just overviews of the scoring criteria. The updated scoring criteria that was utilized. And then the following slide is the implementation initiatives, modified as I described previously based on input and discussion by the BMC staff. And then going on to the next slide is the scoring criteria, and then on to the next slide and the next slide. The scoring and ranking. And so before we get into the scoring and ranking, I wanted to preface and just what the scoring and ranking represents and how it was envisioned that it can be utilized to support the BMC and its initiatives. And so first off, the scores presented in the staff report and on the following slides were developed by consensus agreement from the BMC staff that participated in the scoring and ranking evaluation. And the information that they used to develop those scores was either from previously completed analyses or studies on the specific initiatives, information on other similar comparable projects that in the county or elsewhere that was available, or just from the collective knowledge of the BMC staff that participated in the exercise. One of the things that the staff that we recognized as we went through the scoring and ranking is that there are a number of specifically the implementation initiatives that really require further evaluation to make truly informed decisions on whether they're the best available solutions for improving water supply sustainability in the basin. And that we'll reiterate that as one of the findings. And then additionally, the scoring that we're going to review is really not intended to be a prescriptive roadmap for how the BMC should focus, meaning it's not intended to be that the top ranked one goes first and then the next one is next. It's really a framework for a collaborative process in which the BMC parties were able to discuss and evaluate the different planning and implementation initiatives available to them, identify areas of alignment amongst the parties, and then with the goal of helping building consensus on how the BMC and or the BMC parties want to invest their staff and funding resources moving into the future to improve the sustainability of the basin. And then finally, the absolute scores provided in the scoring and ranking are not intended to be critical in terms of their one score versus another. It was designed to try to group and categorize the initiatives into potentially higher ranking, medium ranked, and lower ranking initiatives for the BMC and the BMC parties' consideration as future BMC budgets and other decisions are made around how the BMC moves forward from here. So if we move to the next slide, this is the scoring that the BMC staff developed for the planning initiatives. The individual scores for each initiative relative to each criteria is color coded and quantified in a numeric score. And then on the far right, the total scores for each initiatives are summed and then were sorted, with the highest total score meeting the more favorable initiatives at the top, and those initiatives that scored less favorably relative to the scoring criteria that was utilized showing up at the bottom. And then the color coding on the total score represents those that in green that were in the upper 33% of the scoring, the top third, in yellow, the middle thirds of the scoring, and then the lower on the bottom third. And we don't need to necessarily, or right now, go into the individual scoring of each one relative to each criteria or even relative to each other. But I just think it's just important to highlight that some of the initiatives that rose to the top are, recycled water beneficial use evaluation. And there's narrative descriptions in the previous slides in the staff report. But, given the conversation around the previous agenda item, this would speak to this initiative and looking at recycled water as a resource and what's the most and highest and best use that the community could evaluate and utilize that resource for. And another one that scored very high was the basin monitoring metric. An additional one was additional monitoring at Broderson Mound and the installation of transducers to better understand and track the effectiveness of that. Climate change scored high. Improvements to the monitoring well network was in the top tier. Pumping management and intertie utilization evaluation, and then model improvements and peer review the groundwater model, all scored in the top group here. In the middle group, we had the water supply resilience study, which would be a more detailed evaluation of the different implementation initiatives to better characterize and quantify their costs and benefits. Metering of private wells, a transient groundwater model, and then in the lower tier were a rating curve for Los Osos Creek, stream flow sensor, and the evaluation of growth allowance criteria. Then if we go to the implementation initiatives, different set of scoring criteria, but basically the same framework relative to color coding and grouping. And here, as you can see, the top ranked initiative relative to the scoring criteria that was utilized was enhanced conservation, followed closely by a surface water intertie, the community nitrate removal facility or program B, a new initiative called Upper Aquifer Capture and Los Osos Water Recycling Facility Treatment. And then program C, or third program C, expansion well, scored in that top group. In the middle group were the programs D, with and without ag exchange and urban stormwater capture. And then in the lower tier was the Warden Creek stormwater capture, creek discharge program, and sewer area expansion initiatives. One thing I'd like to point out that's not necessarily explicitly shown here, but all these scores were generated using an equal weighting of the scoring criteria. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So if we move to the next slide, I wanted to highlight some of the findings that the BMC staff and myself identified as we went through the scoring and ranking process. The first one was that we identified that there were a couple of what I characterized as essential initiatives that we pulled out from the scoring and ranking. These were 2 planning initiatives, somewhat administrative initiatives, including the formalization of an adaptive management procedures for the BMC and the funding and organizational studies. The staff felt that these were critical for ongoing BMC operations and should be recommended for inclusion in future budgets and BMC activities. An additional one was cost sharing. One of the things that the evaluation that we're presenting today is it highlights the relative ranking of the different initiatives against each other, grouped in planning and implementation initiatives. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't identify a cost sharing framework for each individual initiative. What was included in the evaluation was criteria that looked to identify and score more highly projects that had benefits to more than one party. And so there were criteria around that. But it doesn't identify a cost sharing framework for each individual initiative. And the logic for that was that, the scoring and ranking identifies initiatives that are best suited for and providing the greatest benefits to the sustainability of the basin. And then if there is alignment around those initiatives, then the BMC parties can discuss and evaluate individual cost sharing structures for moving those identified more beneficial initiatives moving forward. And so it's envisioned that that can be a next step, and we'll talk about that later under next steps. Another key finding was weighting factors. As I mentioned, there's not weighting factors applied currently. However, those could be utilized to adjust the scoring and ranking and the outcomes. An additional key finding was the need for updated recycled water estimates. It was determined that, the BMC could really benefit with an approved assessment of how much recycled water we have available both under current and anticipated future conditions, as that would likely inform a number of the implementation projects that focus around the different uses for that recycled water resource. And then the new implementation initiative, as the BMC staff worked through the scoring and ranking evaluation, it was identified that there was a potential implementation initiative that we hadn't originally included on our list. That is the upper aquifer capture and Los Osos water recycling facility treatment concept. This concept would include connecting upper aquifer wells to the existing wastewater collection system to allow for pumping of high nitrate groundwater into the collection system, delivery of that high nitrate water to the treatment facility, treatment of that water through the existing treatment process, and then conveying that water back out to the community through the purple pipe system, either for disposal at Broderson, Bay Ridge, and or delivery to one of the existing or future recycled water customers, or other potential uses that could be identified. One of the real benefits of this initiative is that it leverages existing infrastructure. There are existing wells, there are existing pipelines, and existing treatment facilities in place that could allow a project of this type to potentially move forward with low capital costs. However, it should be noted that there are potentially a number of constraints, including capacity of each of those systems and compatibility of treatment, that would need to be further evaluated to determine if this concept was viable. And then finally, enhanced project definition. As I mentioned before, one of the findings was that some of the implementation initiatives really would benefit or require enhanced project definition, or in a different term, further analysis or study to be able to better quantify the costs and benefits of those projects and evaluate them relative to the other implementation initiatives available to the BMC. And just specifically, those initiatives that would benefit with a further definition would be the surface water intertie, the urban and Warden Creek stormwater capture, the sewer expansion, and the upper aquifer capture and treatment initiatives. And then finally, on the next slide, outlined in the staff report are some potential next steps for the implementation plan. One is obviously receiving input from the BMC on the preliminary scoring and ranking and grouping of the planning and implementation initiatives. And then the second, it could be utilizing this prioritization or any variation on this prioritization with or without weighting factors to assist the BMC and or the BMC party in strategizing their future investments. As mentioned previously, one of the key components of that would be further evaluation of the appropriate cost share structures for the different investments and how to best align costs and benefits for the initiatives that are identified for moving forward. And it's envisioned that this for prioritization and cost share structure could be done as part of the development of the draft calendar year 2021 BMC budget. And if successful, could also feed into the development of a longer term implementation plan or multi-year budget for the BMC and or individual BMC parties to aid in the future BMC budgeting process. And so that concludes my presentation on the implementation plan scoring and ranking. I'd like to turn it back over to the BMC for input and comments.
Thank you, Daniel, for all the hard work that you did and the staff from the various entities involved in the BMC. So I think that you guys did a lot of work, and it's a good step forward. So I think everybody would agree with that. I do have a couple of comments and general questions, and then we'll move on. But you know, I had, when I looked at the chart, which is what I started with, I basically had the 3 questions that you brought up in your discussion points there, which was one about the adaptive management plan and whether it be a JPA or whatever. So I think that's something we need to talk about in a little bit more detail. The second one is, I think that the categories, you know, where it's cost, multi-agency benefits, et cetera, I think there does need to be a weighting of that, because I think that some things are more important than others, at least in my opinion. And then I think we do need to talk about cost and the cost sharing allocation. So those are 3 general things that I think we need to talk about. And then I did have one specific question, and I should have brought this up when the county was there and John Austin, but I was wondering where you have an implementation strategy initiatives. The 3rd item down is the community nitrate removal facility. I wonder if denitrification at the water recycle facility is a possibility, since the infrastructure is already in place, and that may be a way to go. And I'm sorry that I didn't ask that question when he was there or here. But I think that's something that should be considered under the denitrification, is whether it can be done at the WRF or not. So those are my 3 big picture comments and my one detailed comment. So who wants to go next?
This is Charlie from S&T. May I?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. I think the community nitrate removal facility, that project is, if I understand right, is for the creation of potable water for potable use, where routing high nitrate upper aquifer water to the wastewater recycling facility would only produce recycled water, but not potable water.
Right. It would have to be fed into the groundwater basin, correct, and then recycled through that procedure. No, I totally get that, yes.
So if I understand right, that the second one down in the implementation strategic initiatives, that is for potable use, if I understand that correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
I can jump in and clarify this. So the community nitrate facility is as you describe, Charlie, is for potable water treatment. It is an ion exchange nitrate removal process similar to what Golden State and LOCSD have implemented for several of their upper aquifer wells and have in existence. Currently, this would just be an expansion of those, or a new one of those treatment facilities, and that water would go directly back into the potable system. What you're describing, Marshall, really fits under that upper aquifer capture and wharf treatment concept. Is basically the same thing as what you described. It's using the existing wastewater treatment facility as the nitrate removal treatment process. That water would not be of potable quality, would be recycled water of non-potable quality that, yes, would have to either be utilized for landscape irrigation or recharge of the groundwater basin, but would provide additional supply to that system, which could be of value if we identify that an additional recycled water supply could help us increase the sustainable yield of the groundwater basin.
Right, and that was my point. I wasn't saying that it was potable water. I mean, one of the things, and I didn't really want to get into too much detail on this, but you know, with the denitrification facility, we have the brine that has to be shipped off, et cetera. So there's an expense that's incurred, which may be able to be offset because of using the water recycle facility. I was just bringing that up for future consideration.
Yes, all good. And this is Bruce. And the use, you know, if the upper aquifer capture that's treated at the water recycling facility comes back, there's potential it could also offset other pumping that could be beneficial to the basin. And I think that's the kind of technical analysis that Dan might be thinking about. I don't know, Charlie, did you have other questions? I had a sort of a thought as to how to proceed.
So I have other questions and comments, but go ahead.
Well, I think for one thing, I too appreciate all of staff's hard work on this, and I have some thoughts about how much further we should proceed with numerical analysis, you know, in terms of deciding what to do next. I think there may be another approach to deciding what the order of things you know, are to be. But a lot of this revolves around money. In fact, most of government, I've decided, revolves around money and who's gonna pay for things. And so I think that the one significant immediate benefit of this whole exercise has been to identify those two things which are considered essential. So what I'd like to do is see if we could get to public comment and come back to deliberate what we do with this information and where we send staff off to next.
Okay, well, Mark, do you have a comment before we go to public comment?
I do have a comment, but I can wait until after public comment if that's better. Yeah.
It's up to
I don't know
you.
if we want to talk about it now or wait until we get public comment and then have a deeper for
Well, is it
conversation.
anything that's not already included in the staff report? Because I want to make sure the public's aware of what we're going to be discussing.
Well, I was just going to comment on the report.
Okay, well, then we can go to public comment then.
If you'd like to make a public comment and you're on your phone, please dial *9. If you're on your computer, please raise your hand. Lynette, you just have to unmute yourself.
I just wanted to say a very heartfelt thanks to Dan for an excellent report, both on the PowerPoint and in his staff report. So as a member of the public, I just want to express that I'm really impressed with what he did. Thank you.
Hey, Laura,
Jeff,
anybody
will this-
else? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Marshall and committee members. My name is Jeff Edwards. First of all, with regard to the planning initiative ranking, clearly the recycled water beneficial use evaluation is number one. That's what Supervisor Gibson didn't want to talk about, but I think it needs to be discussed. And unfortunately, or maybe you will have a discussion about that we didn't have at the last item. Deploying the water to Broderson is hugely important. We need to find a partner for that project. That partner is the creek discharge. You put the treated effluent in the creek during the summer, and the treated effluent during the winter goes to Broderson. It's a simple concept. We've tended to make this thing more complicated than it needs to be. So I'm not going to waste time on the planning initiatives. I'm going to shift to the implementation initiatives. And again, the creek discharge, because of its fairly low cost and low tech, should be scoring considerably higher. I have it scoring 28 points. Seawater intrusion needs to be one of the criterion that are used to evaluate any of these options. And I don't see seawater intrusion mitigation factors as a category. I think that's imperative. And for example, the creek discharge, because the creek bottom, I should say the lower aquifer surfaces at the creek bottom, that has a huge seawater intrusion mitigation factor and would score much higher. The community nitrate removal facility, well, let's be clear that it's not going to go at the Golden State Water Company facility at Rosina and Fern. So what that entails is going out and finding a piece of property, buying it, permitting this facility, and then implementing it with the high cost of O&M because of brine disposal. The Program B community nitrate facility should be near the bottom. Moreover, it was priced at $13.5 million in 2003 in the basin plan. So that's not a cost-effective project, Program B. Move the creek up, move the Program B way down. Additionally, this new project, the upper aquifer, sending that treated water out. I mean, where did this come from? This just surfaced. Whose idea was this? I mean, I don't think anything has been fleshed out enough to even get this on the scoreboard. So that should be lowered. Let's go with cost benefit analysis. The most water for the least amount of money. Thank you very much.
Lindy, you just have to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Lindy again, and very interesting, and it looks like a ton of work went into producing this set of documents, so kudos to everybody. I guess I simply wanted to, again, talk about the recycled water, which is up at the top of this other list, but just a reminder, recycled water, whether if we were to take all the nitrated upper aquifer that we can pump out and send out for treatment to the plant, it's still some of the most expensive water that we can get. So of course, balancing it with what the ion exchange method would be on site, you know, you have to take a look at it. Ultimately, the recycled water benefits our basin plan by taking users off the basin. That slows down saltwater intrusion and gives us more access to safe water supply. If we do not look at recycled water going to ag farmers, then it's a complete failure, really. We're just pushing water around and spending a lot of money, hoping it will go where it's supposed to go or where we want it to go. I would really bring up the fact that the quality of this water and getting contracts with large farm activities is a huge priority. And if you run the nitrated water through and have it treated there, you'll have an excess of water to do something with. And again, I don't think until we take these large ag farms and the green spaces, the schools, the park, those areas that can take recycled water, we're just spinning our wheels again. It's sort of like the same thing. If you don't meter the wells to see how much water's coming out, then you really can't be balancing a basin. You haven't got enough information. So I'll just throw that out as my comment. But the report looks like it's going to be useful, and I'll let the rest of you decide all the details. Thank you.
There's no other public comment at this time.
All right, thank you, Laura. So we'll close public comment and bring it back for discussion. Charlie or Mark, which one do you wants to go next?
I can go first unless Charlie, you want to go?
Go ahead, Mark.
All right. So yeah, I just want to reiterate, appreciate the time and the effort and the thought that went into this analysis. I think, bringing everybody together and having these discussions is a big step forward. When I look at this report, it's actually, a simple measure of the projects that we have limited information on. So these projects need much more detail before we really put them into a ranking category to fully understand where they fall. One of the things that I notice is that the scale is a small crunched amount of numbers together. And so there may be only one or two numbers that really separate it from the three categories. And the projects, since they're separated by such a small number, they can be easily influenced by one category or another. One of the things that kind of caught my attention with a few others, I'm going to limit them, but just as an example, the grant funding opportunities seem to sway the projects. And if we chase projects for grant funding, we may not be the best approach there. So really looking at that, how we rank them and categorize them, I appreciate, Dan, you did bring that to the table and say that, this really isn't to be used as the number one project is at the top of the list, so to speak. But I do appreciate having those projects before us. And so really what I thought the essential initiatives is a key step, next step moving forward. And, we have to talk about, as Bruce mentioned, everything revolves around money. We have to talk about funding. How are we going to fund these projects? Because, we saw a presentation on the wastewater project. Some of the questions that were asked were stepped into the operation of the wastewater. And so, that can't be a BMC project if it's going to drop, that's funded by BMC and water ratepayers, if it drops into the operation of the wastewater. And that was one of my concerns when I first saw the upper aquifer capture. Once that water hits the wastewater facility, we've lost all control of it as water purveyors, so to speak. So unless there's some agreements or something, it's just my red flag that came up there. Charlie made the comment about keeping the water potable, and if there was some nitrate removal systems, having that stay with the purveyors, funded by the purveyors, and keeping it potable water to offset lower aquifer pumping. the timing of these projects is also critical. One of the things that we have to look at is the community plan is coming out. We talk about funding. There's just in my opinion, a critical opportunity to capture funding through the new development. If we complete the well C from the district, then we're going to be able to, new development's going to happen. And if there's not an assessment fee on those new users of the basin, we've missed a huge opportunity to fund some of these projects. So those are just my big comments. Definitely willing to sit down and dive into the details, but just wanted to throw that out as a general comment on the report. But once again, thanks for diving into it. I think you guys did a good job. I think we could do some more work on it. Right now, I don't see that we need to do work on these projects. We have this before us. The next step is really looking at our funding and timing would be the next steps, in my opinion.
All right, thank you, Mark. Okay, Charlie, you're up.
Yes, I'm glad Director Zimmer went before me because he said some things in a very clear, concise way that I wanted to say. Thanks, Mark. And thanks to the staff for putting this together, because I think the major part of this work results in providing a framework to discuss these projects. I don't think it's handy for me to discuss right now, for any of us to discuss issues with the ranking of individual projects right now. For instance, one thing I won't discuss is that there seems to be a pretty high weighting factor for grant funding on projects that have a relatively low cost. But those discussions can be brought up when we're discussing the individual projects. Being able to have this much thought go into these projects, individual projects, is huge for us and allows us to move on from here, I think, with some other fairly large things. I think coming up soon should be a discussion of formation of a JPA, for instance, and then budget planning, year-to-year budget planning for these projects. And that kind of thing. But thank you very much to all the staff for all the work they put in. I know I saw the staff meetings. It was a pretty grueling meeting schedule that you guys used to put this together. I sure appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. Yeah, I think the one thing that we probably should look at getting some proposals from outside consultants for is the JPA formation and the cost and the benefits, et cetera. I know we've done that once before and we rejected it, but it may be something that we want to direct Dan to go out and get us some proposals to how we would move forward and having an analysis done of the JPA and the cost and cost benefit ratio. So that's one thing that I think I would like to proceed forward with.
I agree, Marshall. If I could just offer a couple of thoughts.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bruce. I didn't know you had any additional ones. I wouldn't have cut you off.
Oh, no, I ran out of thoughts for a while, but then a few more have flitted by. So, no, let me just offer this as a plan going forward. I think the two initiatives that were identified as essential, we should today commit to directing staff to pursue. And I agree with both you and Mark, and by extension Charlie, that we need a serious proposal to form a JPA. What we do with that JPA depends on, how we can secure funding and how we move forward. But I think it's become clear that the structure of a JPA for this organization needs to be carefully considered, and so we need to get that in front of us. Related to that very closely is the funding mechanism, and I can assure Mark, absolutely, new development has to pay its way here. And so that's basically an AB 1600 kind of analysis that is going to decide what the appropriate share of new development's contribution to getting any of this kind of stuff done. We have a rather a minor one in trying to spread the cost of basin management fairly over the basin, but I think that's a smaller issue, but one that should be considered. Recall that the operation of the recycled water facility falls entirely on the wastewater ratepayers, where the benefit is basin-wide. And so we've talked for a long time about how we spread that, and I think an analysis of what that looks like, again, I think that's fairly minor relative to the new development funding should be. And then formalizing our adaptive management procedures, I think is also an essential thing. So I understand this is a grueling process, and thanks again to staff for undertaking it. But I think we can all agree that those two essential things are things we need to move forward, whatever we can do for the rest of this calendar year, and then let's get those into the budget for 2021. Then in terms of planning, I think there are a number of useful planning items that should be undertaken, and at least what we should do is try to get a decent sense of what maybe the first 4 or 5 of those planning efforts are going to cost. Because making sure we use the recycled water to the beneficial use is important. How we do the monitoring metric evaluations important. Understanding what's happening at Broderson important. Climate change important. And making sure our monitoring wells are working. I mean, I think all of those have their importance there. I won't choose, among them, but I think the exercise that was taken in the planning initiatives, I think reasonably separated those as things that we should consider. So my second piece, my proposal would be as a second piece is to direct staff to go ahead and price those things out for us, cost and benefit of them, what would they accomplish, and let's consider how many, none, or perhaps all of those particular ones we might contemplate moving forward on the 2021 budget. And then finally, in the implementation initiatives, I agree with Mark. This numerical system tended not to differentiate very strongly between projects. I think weighting is one thing that might do it. Better information is one thing that might do it. But I think we have a basic understanding of what we need to do right now for implementation, and that is to be sure that existing programs A and C are completed. And I know we're essentially there, but I think we need to confirm that those 2 programs have been checked off the box. If I remember correctly, there is a well in program C that we have suggested deferring. We could make a decision on whether, in fact, we can formally move that out of program C. But I think therein lies the to-do list for implementation, is to say, we have accomplished programs A and C, and now let's assess where we are in terms of the basin. So that's a 3-part thing. The 2 essential things: pricing for the top 4 or 5 planning items, and confirmation and attention to anything left undone, but confirmation that programs A and C are completed. And then we can start, I think, whether we want to revisit the numerical ranking of these things, or whether we want to set goals and assess individual implementation projects against their ability to meet those goals. All of that, I think, works once we have the organizational and funding pieces better understood. So that would be my proposal for moving forward today.
All right, thank you, Bruce. So I think, if I understand correctly, we have a consensus on moving forward to get some proposals for the JPA and then moving forward on adaptive management plan. Does everybody agree with those two things?
Yes.
S&T says yes.
Mark? I don't know, we lost Mark. Well, we got three of us in consensus. So Daniel, you take direction about the JPA and adaptive management plan, and I can talk to you a little more detail, offline so we can move this forward. So then,
Marshall,
Charlie,
does
what do
that
you-
include the funding and so
That's where I was-
team is-
that's where I was going, Bruce. I was going to ask Charlie what he thought about that.
Yeah.
So that one, because we mentioned the other two, Bruce, but that one wasn't mentioned by Charlie. So Charlie, what do you think about that funding thing that Bruce raised?
I'm sorry, that caught me by surprise. The funding for what specifically?
Bruce, you want to repeat that for
Yeah.
his?
So the way, certainly the way county staff looks at it, and I think it's the way that Dan presented it just now, that one of the two essential initiatives is the combination of funding and organizational studies. Funding was lumped in with the organizational studies. And the funding is, for instance, as Mark is concerned about, how much and when does new development pay to support the water system here, the basin plan. So I very strongly feel that we should move forward under, developing the cost measures, what it would take to assess new development, for instance, their fair share of our programs here.
Well, yeah, and I think maybe I misunderstood. This is Charlie from S&T. I misunderstood. I understood Mark, his comments to be that projects and initiatives that are for promoting growth should be paid for by development.
Yeah.
And I certainly support that.
That's what Bruce said, I think, Charlie.
Yeah, that's what I want to figure out.
He
Okay,
wants to figure out how much it would cost.
I also completely support that. Yes, and those projects which are not focused on supporting the existing population, but enhancing that population, increasing that population. Yes, I completely agree with that.
Okay, so we have consensus. I don't know why Mark can't get on with us, but I think we have consensus between the three of us again to move forward with that. So Daniel, that's three tasks that we're moving forward for you. Oh, Mark, you're unmuted.
Sorry about that.
What do you think about those three tasks?
Yeah, I'm just a little unclear on the three tasks because, the number one I have is the essentials studies for the funding and the organizational studies. The second one is for new development to understand the cost for and how to fund or how new development would pay for funding. And then the third one was the top priorities of this initiative.
Let me see if I can sort it out.
Okay, go on. Yeah, Bruce.
I had a three-part plan, but within one of them are three more parts. So the first thing I'm interested in is what have been deemed the essential initiatives. And the bullets that I'm looking at say one of the essential initiatives is funding and organizational studies.
Correct.
Funding meaning funding of making sure we're clear on funding existing operations and new and those implementation initiatives that will support new development. So take funding as one thing we need to do, and that's very much focused on funding from new development. Organizational studies are the study of forming a JPA, what the implications of that are, And then the third thing within essential initiatives is formalizing our adaptive management procedures.
Correct. That's a different order, Bruce, but those are the three things.
Those are the three things within essential.
So adaptive
That's
management, I
better.
think, was the one that you were missing, Mark.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification, because I thought we were talking about specific items on the summary and
No.
ranking.
And let me,
No,
yeah, and then
big
I
picture
had some
stuff.
other thoughts. Right.
Big picture stuff right now.
Yeah, okay, okay.
So are you on board with those three things as tasks that we're going to give Daniel to pursue?
Yes.
Okay, so we have unanimous consent for those tasks. All right. Now, if we want to go into the details of it, or if we want to defer that, that's up to you guys.
So if I could, Marshall, my next proposal would be to have Dan price out and give us a narrative in terms of benefit for 4 or 5 of the most important planning initiatives. And I'm looking at the recycled water beneficial use evaluation, the basin monitoring metric evaluation, and so forth. I think the numerical ranking within the planning thing worked well enough that at least we could get some numbers to see, you know, because we need to keep working forward, right? And so we need to keep gathering the information that's going to allow us to execute our adaptive management. So I would propose we at least get some estimates of some of those planning items, maybe 4 or 5 of the most important planning items, and
All right.
bring those back as part of forming the budget for 2021.
Okay.
And that's
well,
where I was struggling with, just because, you know, Dan mentioned that this is not a ranking system, so to speak, and talked about how there was little information. You know, when I go through it, I have a lot of questions, and I'm not sure. I wouldn't want to have Dan do more work until I have a chance to talk to staff about that. I'm not ready to approve that.
Let me propose a different approach to it. Why don't each of the parties to the basin management look at the planning initiatives and choose the ones that they think are most important, independent of the specific ranking, or using the ranking if they want. But in terms of our vision of understanding this basin better, maybe each of the parties in the next cycle could get Dan their top interest in terms of planning initiatives, and then he can figure out what to do about that, and we can see how it might be budgeted for next year once we reach consensus on what's important.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great.
That sounds good to me, Bruce. What do you think, Charlie?
Yeah, I think that's not a bad way to go from here. I'd like to not have that hamstring the staff. We meet so seldom that that means that we may not have this information back to staff for 2 months. Or are you suggesting that we do this in the next few days and provide this information to staff outside of a regular meeting?
My idea is for each entity to provide their choices for what planning initiatives they think should move forward in 2021 to Dan as soon as possible, so that at a point when we're forming the budget for 2021, we can determine which of the planning initiatives should be put into that budget as something we should be doing next year.
All right, that makes sense. So yeah, getting information back to Dan as soon as possible, as Bruce mentioned, on the planning strategic initiatives.
Yes, I agree, and we can do that. S&T can do that in the next.
Okay, and then the final thing that I'd like to do on the implementation side is to have a discussion as soon as we can to see whether we have completed, whether we can check off our list programs A and C. And I don't have the usual matrix right in front of me, but it seems to me that we're very close to declaring programs A and C completed. And at a point, I think it would be useful for this committee to say, yes, we have done programs A and C, and having done those, let us now assess the condition of the basin and use that baseline as a starting point for looking into the future.
Yeah, but Bruce, I mean, one of the things about our program C is that we deferred one of the
Right.
3 wells.
Right.
So I don't know how we could do that until we do the third item that we just discussed, the adaptive management review.
So I guess to me, that was really the one thing I was thinking about, Mark, was to say, look, we've said for many months now that well has been deferred. I think we should take some formal action as soon as we can to decide, is it deferred or is it not deferred? And if it's not part of program C, I think we should make some kind of formal statement that it is no longer necessary to complete what we needed to do under program C, and we shall declare program.
An additional comment, then we'll move on to item 7B. Okay, seeing none, can we move to 7B, Daniel, please? The update on the status of the basin plan infrastructure projects.
We can, and yeah, so this is our update and then the matrix we have around the status of the different programs. Similar to the executive director's report, I've highlighted changes in from the previous month as underlines, and so the only significant change we have in the update of basin plan infrastructure projects is related to program C and the expansion well number 2. And the update is that the field work has been completed and the ECA document has been submitted, and actually to the LOCSD, and the Utilities Advisory Committee will be reviewing the environmental document or the ECA at their meeting tonight, I believe, with the intent that then that document will go to the board of directors for the CSD on November 5th. And so just wanted to highlight that those that are interested, they can access and download the environmental constraints analysis document at the LOCSD website as part of the agenda packet for the Utilities Advisory Committee meeting.
Sounds good.
Is that it?
That's the update I have. If there were any specific questions about the findings from that report, I had originally thought that maybe Ron Munns could speak to that, but I just got notification that they're having some internet access issues at the CSD right now, so I'm not sure we have somebody available to answer specific detailed questions.
Well, I think we're probably, yeah, I think all you can do is go on the CSD website and go ahead and look at the staff report for the UAC, and then just listen to that committee, or ask the CSD staff, Ron or Margaret, offline what their answers are.
Yeah, and the thought was that let the LOCSD take that item through their commission and board process before making it a more sort of formal item for presentation to the BMC.
No, I think that's fine. I'm speaking as a member of the CSD, but does anybody have any objection to that?
Nope.
Okay. So with that, then I guess we'll move to the last item on the agenda, which is public comment for items not on the agenda.
Do we need to do public comment for item 7?
Oh, yeah. Does anybody have, I'm sorry, I apologize. Do we have any public comment for item 7?
If you'd like to
B?
make a public comment and you're on your phone, please dial *9. If you're on your computer, please raise your hand. Again, that's *9 or raise your hand. There's no public comment.
I didn't see any, so good. Okay, so that moves us then to, excuse me. Oh. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Oh, so that moves us up to the last item on the agenda then? I'm sorry, I lost my agenda here.
Yeah, item 8, and public comment on items not appearing.
Yeah,
on
we
the
just
agenda.
did that, so there was no public comment. So unless anybody else has any other comments from the committee, we'll go ahead and adjourn.
What was the last public comment? That was on 7B, correct?
Oh, pardon me, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's why now I pulled up the agenda, I can see. Yeah, this is item number 8 for public comments for items not appearing on the agenda. I apologize, I'm sorry.
If you would like to make a public comment on an item not on the agenda, please dial *9 if you're on your phone or raise your hand.
I see Lindy has her hand raised.
Yes, Lindy, you're able to speak.
Thank you. I
I
had a few-
apologize, Lindy, by the way. I didn't mean to not allow you time to talk. I just had a internet issue there for a moment.
Lindy, please unmute yourself. There's something weird going on with Zoom. I apologize.
yeah, I thought I had. I guess what I wanted to speak in public comment in general then would be this December 15th Board of Supervisors meeting is addressing so many important items for Los Osos. It's really disturbing because we all know that it's just going to be approved. 3 of the board members have no clue what's going on out here. So it will be approved and then we'll have to deal with it, I guess, at the Coastal Commission. So I'm rather offended that they were all grouped together. One of the items there was sort of this discussion about new development paying its way is also frustrating because, for instance, there are, I think, approximately 500 empty lots that were going to pay for the sewer hookup. It was guaranteed they would be able to pay for their hookup share, which was about $28 million. And they weren't because of our water problems. So in other words, the prohibition zone users are paying an extra 20 towards that $28 million. So the idea that Mr. Gibson is suggesting that he would like to see 70 homes per year go in, it would take 7 to 8 years if we put that many homes in that fast, which I think is totally negligent. But so when you look at how development is going to pay, I think we all know that rarely does development really pay their fair share of new infrastructure costs. So I want to put a reality check on that whole idea. Again, when, I'd have to agree with Mr. Gibson about the basin management costs are not really fairly spread over the entire basin, and all the other users are not contributing towards the basin cleanup. They're not contributing to anything. So all these costs land pretty much on a lot of the people in the prohibition zone. And so I guess one of the things that the county could do would be to get us a price for a cost estimate of what it would run to do quantity metering for all private wells. Today, get started now. There's a project that is starting up and they have a well they've never used and they're able to just go on without any of the monitoring. The county health already monitors for quality, so it wouldn't be that expensive to gather the data. So that's all.
Lindsay, you've hit your 3 minutes. All right, there's no other public comment at this time.
All right, seeing no other public comment, then we'll move to item number 9, which is adjournment. Again, I want to thank staff for all their hard works of all the entities in working on that implementation plan. And I know all the other committee members agree with that. So with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn.
All right.
Thank
See
you,
you all
everybody.
later.
Thank you. Have a good day.